Okay? So you want to own an EV charging station. You buy a strip of asphalt, you bolt down a few chargers, cars pull in, they plug in, and the money flows while you sleep. It's the closest thing the modern world has to a gas station that never needs a tanker truck. No fuel to buy, no inventory to spoil. Electricity comes out of the ground, you sell it for more than you paid, and every car in the country is slowly being replaced by one that has to stop at your machine. It sounds like a toll booth on the future itself. Sounds simple. It is not simple. And the story of how these stations actually make money and how they quietly bleed to death while looking perfectly busy is one of the strangest stories in all of infrastructure. Before you sell a single kilowatt, you have to survive putting the thing in the ground. And this is where the first illusion cracks. People assume a charger is like a vending machine. You buy it, you plug it into the wall, you're open for business. That is a level 2 charger, the slow kind, the type you might see in a parking garage. It costs a few $1,000s and adds maybe 20 or 30 miles of range per hour. Nobody driving cross-country is going to sit at one for 4 hours. The kind of station people actually picture, the kind that fills a car in 15 or 20 minutes, is a DC fast charger. And a DC fast charger is not an appliance. It is a piece of industrial power equipment. A single 150 to 350 kilowatt fast charger can cost somewhere between $100,000 and over $300,000 by the time it is installed and running. And most of that cost is not the machine itself. The machine might be $40,000 or $50,000. The rest is everything around it. You have to trench up the parking lot to run heavy conduit. You have to pull cable thick enough to move that much power without melting. You often have to install a new transformer, because the grid connection feeding an ordinary retail lot was never designed to deliver the power of a small apartment building through a single cable. And then you wait, because the utility has to approve the interconnection, upgrade the equipment on their side, and physically connect you. In many markets, that process takes 12 to 24 months, and transformer shortages have stretched it longer. You have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you are still standing in an empty lot waiting for permission to turn the machine on. So here is the first thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a charging station. You are not really buying a charger. You are buying a connection to the power grid, and the grid decides how much that connection is worth and how long you'll wait for it. The chargers are the cheap part. Say you've survived the build. The concrete is poured, the transformer hums, the screens light up. Now, how does this thing actually make money? Because the answer is more layered than most people realize, and the layers are where the whole business lives or dies. The first and simplest layer is the energy sale. You buy electricity from the utility at wholesale-ish rates, and you sell it to drivers by the kilowatt hour. A driver pulls in, takes 30 kilowatt hours to fill up, and pays you a markup on every one of them. Straightforward. This is the layer everybody understands, and it is almost never the layer that makes the station profitable on its own, because the margin on raw electricity after what you pay the utility is thinner than people think, and it gets eaten alive by a cost we'll get to in a minute. The second layer is time. Many stations charge not just for energy, but for how long you occupy the stall. Some charge by the minute. Almost all charge what's called an idle fee, a penalty that kicks in when your car is done charging but you've left it parked in the spot, blocking a paying customer. Tesla popularized this. The car finishes, and if you don't move it, the meter keeps running at a punishing rate per minute. It sounds petty. It is actually essential because a fast charger only makes money when a car is actively pulling power. A finished car sitting in the stall is a machine earning nothing while still costing you everything. The idle fee isn't really about the money it collects. It's about keeping the most expensive asset you own from sitting idle. In this business, an empty stall and a blocked stall lose you the same thing. The third layer is subscriptions and membership. Many networks offer a monthly plan. Pay a flat fee, get a lower per kilowatt hour rate. This does something clever. It turns an unpredictable stream of random drivers into a base of committed customers who have already paid you and are now motivated to use your stations instead of a competitor's, because they're trying to get their money's worth. It's the same trick a gym uses. The revenue arrives whether the customer shows up or not. The fourth layer is the one almost nobody thinks about. And for some stations, it's the difference between profit and loss. It's the money that has nothing to do with selling electricity at all. Government subsidies and environmental credits. In the United States, a federal program called NEVI set aside roughly $5 billion to build charging along highway corridors, paying a large share of the construction cost of qualifying stations. And in states like California, there's a system called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, where the operator of a charging station earns tradable credits simply for dispensing clean electricity. Those credits can be sold to oil companies that need them to comply with emissions rules. For some California stations, these credits have quietly been worth as much as, or more than, the electricity itself. Read that again. The most profitable product a charging station sells might not be the charge. It might be a piece of paper the government created, sold to the very industry the charger is supposed to replace. And then there's the fifth layer, the one that mirrors an old gas station truth. The charge is the bait. The margin is inside. A driver at a fast charger is trapped in one place for 15 or 20 minutes with nothing to do and a wallet in their pocket. That's a captive audience the gas station could only dream of, because gassing up takes 3 minutes and nobody lingers. So the smart operators put the chargers next to a convenience store, a coffee shop, a fast food counter, an actual sit-down restaurant. The electricity might barely break even. The overpriced coffee and the bag of snacks are where the real margin hides. The charger isn't selling energy. It's selling 20 minutes of guaranteed dwell time in front of a cash register. So far, this sounds like a machine that prints money from 5 directions at once. Now here's the other side of the ledger, and it's the single most important number in this entire business, the one that destroys more charging stations than anything else. It's called a demand charge. Here is how a demand charge works and why it's so lethal. When you buy electricity for a normal business, you mostly pay for the total energy you use over the month. But utilities charge large power customers a second, separate fee based on the highest single spike of power you ever drew, even for just a few minutes. It's measured in kilowatts, not kilowatt hours. The logic from the utilities side is fair enough. They have to build the wires and transformers big enough to handle your worst moment, so they charge you for that worst moment, whether it happens once or 1,000 times. Now apply that to a 350 kilowatt fast charger. The instant one car plugs in and pulls full power, your peak demand for the entire month is set. And the demand charge on that peak can run into thousands of dollars a month, all by itself, before you've sold a single additional kilowatt hour. Here's the trap almost nobody sees coming until they own the station. That demand charge doesn't care how many cars you served. Serve one car all month or serve 1,000. The peak is the same, and so is the bill. This means a brand new charging station with low traffic is in a nightmare scenario. The demand charge is enormous and fixed. The number of paying customers to spread it across is tiny, and so the cost per charge is astronomical. You are paying for the power of a small factory and selling the output of a lemonade stand. This is why so many public chargers lose money for years. It's not that nobody uses them. It's that not enough people use them to dilute a bill that stays the same no matter what. And this exposes the real enemy of the charging business, the number everything else revolves around: utilization. What percentage of the time is your charger actually plugged into a paying car? A gas pump might be busy for a few minutes at a time all day. A fast charger occupies a car for 15 or 20 minutes. But for the economics to work, that stall needs cars lined up through the profitable hours. And across the industry, real-world utilization on public fast chargers has often sat in the low teens as a percentage, sometimes lower. Many stations need utilization well above that just to cover the fixed costs, so you get the counterintuitive killer of this whole industry. A charging station can look perfectly healthy, screens glowing, a car or two plugged in whenever you drive past, and still lose money every single month because the fixed costs were built for a level of traffic that hasn't arrived yet. Looking busy is not the same thing as being profitable. That distinction is where fortunes in this industry quietly disappear. Now, before we get to how these stations die, there's a second trap sitting inside the hardware itself, and it's a trap that a mall owner or a bank owner never has to think about. The plug might become obsolete while it's still bolted to the ground. For years, there were competing standards for how a fast charger physically connects to a car. There was THA Demo, an early standard from Japan. There was CCS, the combined charging system used by most non-Tesla cars in North America and Europe. And there was Tesla's own connector, which Tesla eventually opened up and renamed the North American Charging Standard, or NACS. For a long time, if you built a station, you had to guess which plugs to install, and installing the wrong ones meant turning away cars. Then, starting in 2023, the ground shifted violently. One major automaker after another, Ford, General Motors, and eventually nearly the entire industry, announced they would adopt Tesla's NACS connector. Almost overnight, CHAdeMO became a dead standard, and stations built around the wrong plug faced a future of retrofits or irrelevance. Think about what that means for the person who spent $300,000 per stall. The car is the customer, and the customer just changed the shape of its wallet. A gas station never had to worry that cars would suddenly stop accepting its nozzle. A charging station does. The hardware you bought as a 12 or 15-year asset can be partially stranded by a decision made in a boardroom you don't sit in. This is the anchor tenant problem of the charging world. Your whole investment quietly depends on standards and vehicles you don't control staying compatible with the machine you already paid for. To understand how all of this plays out in the real world, it helps to look at the companies that tried to build these networks at scale, because they've been living this math in public for years. Consider the pure play charging networks that trade on the stock market, companies whose entire business is owning and operating public chargers. Names like ChargePoint, EVgo, Blink. If owning charging stations were the passive toll booth people imagine, these companies would be printing money. Instead, the story for years has been the opposite. Enormous revenue growth paired with persistent losses. They built the stations filled slowly, and the fixed costs, the demand charges, the maintenance, the software, the customer support, all arrived on schedule while the utilization crept up far more slowly than anyone projected. The market valued them like they owned the future, then repriced them brutally when it realized how long and how expensive the road to profitability actually was. The lesson buried in those stock charts is simple. Being early to a real trend and losing money for years are not opposites. In infrastructure, they're often the same thing. Then there's Electrify America, one of the largest fast-charging networks in the country. Here's the detail that tells you everything about how hard this business is. Electrify America was not built by an entrepreneur who saw a golden opportunity and raised money to chase it. It was built with roughly $2 billion that Volkswagen was forced to spend as part of the settlement for the diesel emissions cheating scandal. In other words, one of the biggest charging networks in America exists in large part because a court made a car company build it as punishment. That is not the profile of an industry where the economics were obviously irresistible. That is the profile of an industry that needed a $2 billion shove to get off the ground. Now here's the part that makes this a finance story and not a technology story. There's a hidden cost eating this industry alive that the spreadsheets often miss, and it's reliability. A gas pump either works or it's clearly broken. A fast charger can be plugged in, showing a green light, and simply fail to deliver power, or deliver it at a fraction of the promised speed, or stop halfway through. Independent studies of public fast chargers in some regions have found that a meaningful share, in some surveys around a quarter of them, were not working properly at any given moment. Screens frozen, payment systems down, cables damaged, chargers that never even started the session. Every one of those failures is a customer who drove to your station, couldn't charge, and now tells everyone they know that public charging is unreliable. And a broken charger is the worst asset in the world. It generates zero revenue, still owes its share of the fixed costs, and actively destroys the reputation that would bring the next customer. The federal NEVI program even wrote a hard rule into its funding. Stations it pays for must maintain 97% uptime. That number exists precisely because so much of the industry couldn't hit it. The reliability problem points at the deepest structural risk in this entire business, the one that runs underneath everything, and it's the same kind of macro shift that hollowed out the shopping mall. For a mall, the threat was online shopping. For the fast charging station, the threat is the driver's own garage. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about electric cars. The vast majority of charging, by most estimates around 80%, happens at home, overnight, slowly, cheaply, while the car sits in a driveway doing nothing. A person with a home charger almost never needs a public fast charger except on a long road trip. And a road trip is a handful of days a year. Sit with what that does to the demand picture. The gas station never had this problem, because you cannot refine gasoline in your garage. But every EV owner with a driveway is, in effect, a tiny competing fuel station that undercuts you on price and beats you on convenience, and it's already parked at their house. So the public fast charging business is not fighting for all EV charging. It's fighting for the sliver that happens away from home, on trips, in apartments without garages, in dense cities where nobody has a driveway. That sliver is real, and it will grow as EVs grow. But it is a fraction of the giant number people imagine when they picture every car in the country needing to visit a charger. The mall's convenience monopoly was broken by the couch. The fast chargers is broken by the driveway. Now, let's look at what happens when a company does almost everything right, because the contrast tells you exactly where the money in this business really hides. Consider Tesla's supercharger network. While the pure-play networks lost money for years and Electrify America had to be funded by a court order, Tesla quietly built the largest and most reliable fast-charging network on the planet. Tens of thousands of stalls worldwide, with uptime numbers the rest of the industry could only envy. And Tesla did it by breaking almost every rule of the standalone charging business. First, Tesla wasn't trying to make money on the chargers. It was selling cars. The superchargers existed to make the cars more valuable, so the network could run near cost for years, while a competitor trying to profit on electricity alone was drowning. That's a luxury a standalone operator never has. Second, Tesla controlled the entire stack, the car, the plug, the software, the payment. There was no clumsy screen, no failed credit card reader, no app that wouldn't load. You plugged in, and it worked, because the same company built both ends of the cable. Third, Tesla clustered its stations along the exact highway corridors where road trippers had no home charging alternative, maximizing the one type of demand a driveway can't steal: high utilization, low failure, controlled costs. Every structural trap we've described, Tesla designed around from the start. And then came the twist that turned a cost center into a business. Once nearly every automaker adopted Tesla's NACS plug, Tesla began opening its network to other companies' cars. The network it had built as a loss leader to sell Teslas suddenly became a toll road that every other electric car in the country would eventually pay to use. The chargers that were once a marketing expense became a revenue stream on infrastructure that was already built and already paid for. That is the difference between owning the standard and renting it. The company that controlled the plug turned every competitor's customer into its own paying driver. The lesson is brutal for the person imagining a single station on a corner. The winners in this business so far have not been the people who simply owned chargers. They've been the ones who owned something else: the cars, the standard, the software, the land, and used the chargers to reinforce it. The charger, by itself, was almost never the prize. So does owning an EV charging station actually work as a business? The honest answer depends almost entirely on where it sits and how many cars roll through it. And the gap between the good outcome and the bad outcome is enormous. In the optimistic scenario, you own a station in exactly the right place. A busy highway corridor between two major cities where road trippers have no choice but to stop. Or a dense urban neighborhood full of apartment dwellers who have no driveway and no home charger, so your station is their only option day after day, not just on holidays. Your utilization climbs past the break-even line and keeps going. The demand charge, once a monster, becomes trivial when spread across thousands of charges a month. The convenience store next door prints margin off captive customers. The environmental credits stack up in states that offer them. In that case, this is a genuinely excellent business, a piece of essential infrastructure with a toll booth attached, throwing off steady cash for 15 years. This is the outcome the entire industry is betting billions of dollars on. In the realistic bad scenario, you built in the wrong place. A suburban lot that looked promising, near a highway but not on it, in a region where nearly every EV owner has a garage and charges at home for pennies. Your utilization sits stubbornly in the single digits. The demand charge arrives every month like a landlord who doesn't care whether you had customers. 2 of your 4 stalls are down, waiting on a part that's back-ordered, so they earn nothing while still owing their share of the fixed costs. A software update from the automakers quietly favors a plug you don't have. And the whole time, the cars in your area keep waking up every morning already full, charged in a driveway you can't compete with. The station isn't failing because EVs failed. EVs are everywhere. It's failing because the drivers found their electrons somewhere cheaper, and the fixed costs never once looked at your empty stalls and offered you a discount. Neither of these scenarios is exotic. Both are happening right now, across the same industry, sometimes on opposite sides of the same city. 2 identical stations, the same chargers, the same hardware, the same investment, one thriving and one bleeding, separated by nothing but a highway exit and the question of whether the people nearby have a garage. The machine didn't change. The traffic around it did. A charging station looks from the outside like a simple thing, a slab of concrete and a few metal boxes that sell electricity. From the inside, it's actually one of the most delicate financial systems in modern infrastructure, where a bill you can't reduce is set by a spike you can't avoid, where the plug you bolted down can be voted obsolete by companies you don't own, and where your fiercest competitor isn't the station across the street. It's a wall outlet in your customer's garage. So if you do decide to own one, understand what you're actually buying. You are not buying a gas station for the future. You are not buying a passive toll booth on the death of oil. You're buying a fixed cost that shows up every month, whether the cars come or not, wrapped around a bet that enough of them will have nowhere else to plug in. In the right city, on the right road, that bet is one of the best pieces of infrastructure you can own. In the wrong one, you'll spend years paying for the power of a factory to serve the traffic of a quiet street, watching a green light glow over an empty stall.